Hi class, welcome to Abroad Sex Education, where we dive into everything you wish you learned in school. I'm your host and tour guide of the landscape of the labia, Sin.
Wow, nice. That's a good one.
And today, my student for this lesson is Asa.
Hello again.
Hi.
Hi.
Are you excited?
Fancy meeting you here.
This podcast is a sex education resource intended for an adult audience. We'll be having real, inclusive conversations about sexuality, pleasure, relationships, gender, identity, and more. Some topics may be considered explicit or sensitive, especially in today's history segment, where we'll briefly mention female genital mutilation. Please take care while listening. My goal is to help break the stigma around sexuality and provide the kind of education many of us never got. I'm learning too, and I'm bringing what I learned straight to the classroom so we can grow together. You deserve to know what this is about, so you can make an informed decision to listen, or not. That's what consent looks like, even here. Alright, so the title of today's lesson is called It's a Vulva, Not a Vagina. Any guesses to what this lesson is about?
Definitely the male anatomy.
Wrong. Today we're going to demystify female sex organs.
Very cool. Awesome.
Okay. So, the reason why this episode is called It's a Vulva and Not a Vagina is because normally people confuse vaginas and vulvas. It's just terms that are mismatched, and while I understand the intention is to refer to female sex organs, people get it wrong most of the time. And so,
Yeah.
this episode is born out of
Let's
me.
demystify.
Yeah. This episode is just born out of me having a pet peeve against
Terminology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know the difference?
My understanding is that the vulva is the external, like the lips and things like that, right? And the vagina is actually just the muscle that's on the interior of the female sex organ system.
Ooh, look at you ahead of the curve.
Wow, freaking biology major.
Yes. You'll probably do really well in this class then.
No, like.
Mr. Biology. Hopefully you will.
I'm just gonna call it that I really like your artwork is very well done.
Thank you.
Very tasteful.
From the first episode where we talked about why sex was taboo to begin with, sex education isn't expected to be medically accurate in most states in the United States, which is why when you see female sex organs in textbooks, it's usually just the uterus. So
The thing that matters to like get more babies.
yes, it only shows the reproductive organs.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive in and we're going to learn a little bit more than just the uterus. So in today's lesson, we're going to be going into science, where we're going to be breaking down the anatomy of female sex and reproductive organs, what they're called and what they do. And then we're going to go into history. It's going to be the history of the clitoris, or the lack thereof.
Nice. Yeah, the lack of history of the clitoris.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's cool. All right, I'm into it.
We're going to go into how this organ was overlooked over time. And then we're going to go into English, where we're going to have a pop quiz on the different euphemisms that we've used for female sex organs.
Nice. That is an exciting lesson plan. I'm ready for it.
Yay! Okay. Before we actually dive into science, do you know the difference between what a sex organ is and a reproductive organ?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would imagine that most of the reproductive organs themselves are primarily for female anatomy, probably centered around like the eggs and the process of us developing an egg within the woman's body, right? Versus sex is not actually about egg production or storage or generation or any of that. So it's the external facing and or pleasure related parts of the body, be my guess.
Very close.
Nice. Get it to 100%. That's the goal.
So sex organs are parts of the body that are involved in sexual pleasure and intercourse. And then the reproductive organs are parts of the body involved in reproduction. You got that one, though.
Nice.
In the United States, we're only taught reproductive organs because of the American Family Life Act that we covered in episode 1. So, if you remember, in 1981, Congress passed the American Family Life Act. This was also known as the Chastity Law. It gave money to religious affiliate organizations to promote chastity. This is the reason why sex education in the United States is very abstinence forward. If you think about it in the context of timeline, this act was passed in 1981, which is shortly after the sexual revolution, which is in the 1960s and 70s. So, this was in response to the open-minded opinions about sex that women had during that time period. So then there was also that lawsuit, the Bone versus Hardwick, which was when the ACLU claimed that this chastity law violated the Establishment Clause, which separates church and state. So when this case went up to the Supreme Court kicked it back to the federal level and said, hey, you can't talk about Jesus, but the information that you teach has to be medically accurate. Which is why sex education now today mostly teaches the reproductive system, because while that is medically accurate, it is only part of what they feel like is necessary to teach.
Yeah, it's focused on the reproductive side of things rather than potentially the full picture.
Not all states have the most medically accurate information, and even when doing research on this, not a lot of textbooks are medically robust, and that's also part of the problem, which is why this class is very important.
Ready, let's go.
Since the uterus is the primary focus in abstinence forward sex education, we can start there. So meet Curious the Uterus.
Hey, look at that.
And I will also note that I had to use illustrations instead of medically accurate depictions because of censorship issues.
Nice. That's exciting.
So this is my workaround.
Nice. It's just a cute little cartoon.
It's a cute little cuterus.
It's a cuterus cartoon.
So here's Curious the Uterus. These are going to be the different parts of uterus that we'll go into. So the ovaries are the little parts of the body that look like little bulbs that are the things that hold the eggs.
Mm-hmm.
The little hand that looks like it's holding the bulbs is the fallopian tubes. And when an egg is released, it travels through the fallopian tubes, and that's where sperm meets the egg.
Is inside of the fallopian tube.
Yeah. When sperm meets an egg, it's inside the fallopian tube. And then when an egg is fertilized by sperm, it turns into a zygote, and it goes down into the uterus and then connects to the uterine lining, which is the endometrium. So then the egg attaches to the uterine lining, and the whole process of the egg releasing and waiting to be fertilized is called the menstrual cycle. Endometrium is the blood that comes out. When you give birth, you push through your cervix, and the cervix is the thing during childbirth people check to see how wide it's gotten so you'd be ready to give birth to your child. And the vagina or vaginal canal is where menstrual blood exits, penetrative sex occurs, and babies are delivered during childbirth.
Yeah, so it's literally the muscle that controls and lets pass intercourse, all the blood and endometrium slough that comes off during the menstrual cycle. And then when you actually have a baby or babies, this muscle is what helps push this body out. Just crazy. It's like such an impressive muscle, right? When you actually think about it.
There are some fun facts you should know about the clitoris. Did you know a baby girl's ovaries will contain all the eggs she ever had?
Let me process that for a moment. So like I'm a woman, I'm a female, and I have a baby developing inside of me. At the time of that baby developing, at a certain point, that baby girl, even at pregnancy, has...
The baby girl's ovaries will have all the eggs she'll ever have in her lifetime.
Because you are born with the eggs that you will have.
Mm-hmm. You're born with all the eggs you'll ever have.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. So if the sperm meets with the egg while it's in the fallopian tube, but it actually connects in the fallopian tube, or technically anywhere else it shouldn't be, that's considered an ectopic pregnancy. It's really life-threatening.
Is it like a miscarriage, or no? It's that it's developing and just... So it's like if I fuse the zygote to the wall of the fallopian tube.
Yeah.
Rather than actually having it tumble down all the way down into the uterus.
Yes. Yeah. That's why it's really dangerous for abortion to be banned, because an ectopic pregnancy, the zygote is connected to the fallopian tube. Doctors would not do any sort of procedure to help the person because it's considered terminating a pregnancy.
I see. So even if it's a pregnancy that is potentially harmful for the mother, for example, in this case where it's developing in a place that it shouldn't be, it still falls under the same category of abortion.
Yes.
Okay, so basically, if I'm understanding that correctly, let's say that I'm a female and I have a developing baby, and the egg doesn't quite tumble down all the way down into the actual uterus. Instead, it gets stuck in the fallopian tube and it starts to develop. At that point, even though I have this developing embryo that is potentially a child if it grew up in another spot of my uterus, at that point, that's still a pregnancy, but because it's in the wrong spot, I could be considered, it could be life threatening, and I could like develop this ever growing child in the wrong spot of my body.
The pregnancy itself is dangerous. The zygote won't be able to survive because it's not connected to the proper area for functioning. And then it's life-threatening for women because it's something growing in a place that shouldn't be growing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's considered a medical abortion to be able to go in and remove the ectopic pregnancy, which is why demonizing abortion as a whole is really scary, because there are instances where it's medically necessary.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Next, this is a picture of what the fallopian tubes and the uterus looks like inside a woman's pelvic anatomy. It's not floating up in the air like that, like we all think it is. Even uterus looks like she's just floating up. But no, it's actually all squished together, which I thought that was wild.
That is interesting.
Now it's time to meet Vulva, the vulva.
The vulva.
Yes. So the vulva is the external sex organ. So there is different parts. We'll go ahead and review. So the mons pubis is the fatty area over the pubic bone, and it's where you grow pubic hair during puberty. It cushions and protects the pubic bone. And then we have the clitoris. This is actually the clitoris bulb, because there's more to the clitoris than what meets the eye. The clitoris is a highly sensitive organ that contains over 8,000 nerve endings, and its only known function is sexual pleasure. The visible part is the tip, but most of it extends internally, which we will see after this. The clitoral hood is the skin that protects the clitoral gland and can move and retract similarly to the foreskin of a penis.
I did not know that, actually. I didn't know that it was mobile. Like, yeah.
And the urethral opening is your pee hole. It's below the clitoris. The vaginal opening is the opening to the vagina, like we saw on the uterus, the vaginal canal.
Mm-hmm.
It is a muscular canal that connects to the internal genitals to the external genitals, and it connects to the cervix and the uterus. This is, again, where menstrual blood exits, penetrative sex occurs, and where babies are delivered during vaginal birth.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the labia. These are the lips, and they come in two sets. The labia majora, which is the outer lips usually covered by pubic hair, and then the labia minora is the inner lips, which can vary widely in shape, size, and color. They protect the inner structures of the vulva, and they can also be sensitive to touch. Any questions?
No, I actually didn't know about the clitoral hood, though.
Well, I think you'll have more questions after you meet Clitty. This is Clitty the clitoris. This is the internal structure of the clitoris.
Okay.
The clitoral gland is the little bulb. It looks like that red spot that's noted in the graph. That's the part that's actually outside.
So that's the top of the clitoris.
That's what we know as the clitoris. That little tiny spot on the outside. It connects to the clitoral shaft. And it's also known as the cavernous body. The clitoral shaft expands during arousal. After that, you'll see the cura, which are the little legs that are kind of on the outside. It's a wishbone-shaped structure that extends behind the glands, and it wraps around the vaginal canal. And then the vestibular bulbs are spongy, elongated masses of erectile tissue. They sit on top of the vaginal opening, and it swells with blood during arousal. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it?
Does, yes.
We have a few honor roll exclusives that I need to go through. So for all you listeners out there, join our newsletter and sign up for the honor roll to get some exclusive content that we cannot show here because of censorship issues. And lastly, the brain. While the brain is not considered anatomically a sex organ, it's still considered the biggest sex organ because it processes desire, arousal, touch, and emotional connection.
I think that it would be kind of cool to see like what parts of the brain specifically, right? Like, are there sections of the brain that like are particularly more
Yes, there is.
activated?
There is, and that's going to be another episode
Ah, okay.
on a later date.
Got it. I see. Cool.
Now it's time for history. Are you ready?
So ready. Actually, this is very interesting to me. I don't know anything about. So like when you introduced it, right? When you introduced it, I think you were very clear. Like, oh, it's the lack of history in terms of literacy and probably scientific research that goes into the clitoris, right?
Yes.
I think that's really. I never thought about that even before you getting into it. So I don't know anything about what you're going to talk about.
Great. So this is history, a brief history of clitoral illiteracy.
Nice. It even rhymes.
So this is Realdo Colombo. His work, the De Re Anatomica, which is Latin, is one of the earliest anatomical texts to reference the clitoris. It was published in 1559 after his death. He is the man credited for discovering the clitoris.
Oh, okay. Oh, got it.
It was recorded as an organ of sexual pleasure, and he even called it the seat of women's delight. And he wanted to initially call it the sweetness of Venus.
Nice.
The clitoris was referenced in Greek, Persian, and Arabic writings previously, but they were not accurate about its functions. So this was the first time it was documented as a sexual function.
Okay.
He's credited for discovering it.
So because he documented that specific organ was specifically related to pleasure, that's his contribution.
Yeah.
Got
that's
it.
his...
I see. It's the same as if, we were talking about the models last, right? It's like somebody came up with a model the first time, right? So you get the credit of coming up with the model, right? Yeah.
This is just a documented instance of a man discovering a woman can experience pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
But the funny thing about this is there was some beef going on because this man, Gabriel Falloppio, who is also an anatomist, was like, hey, Rialdo, you plagiarized me. But he said that after Rialdo was dead. So Gabriel claimed that he really did discover the clitoris and that Rialdo plagiarized his work. But Gabriel, if you can see by his last name, Gabriel Falloppio, sounds really familiar. What does that sound like? Sounds like fallopian tubes because he was the anatomist that actually helped study the fallopian tubes, and that's why they're credited to his name.
Okay, interesting. Was Rialdo also an anatomist?
Yeah, he was also an anatomist.
Okay, so they probably did they work together or they're like
They're
completely...
just beefing. Beefing with a dead man.
Okay, I see. Got it.
He was like, I discovered the clitoris, but it's not important. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
So that was part of the start of the erasure of the clitoris.
It's not important. What did he say exactly? What was the...
He said it's not important. He said it's not important. He dismissed it completely.
Huh. Okay.
Along came this man, Andreas Veilius. Veilius? He is the father of modern human anatomy. He is the first guy to include anatomical drawings of human bodies in textbooks that were based on human dissection and not just the dissection of animals. He emphasized students should dissect humans
Mm-hmm.
and not just animals, and based human anatomy on what they dissect from animals. He dismissed the clitoris. We don't know if it was because of societal norms or because of a general lack of understanding. It could be both. After, we had this man in the 1850s, Dr. Isaac Baker Brown. He's a prominent obstetrical surgeon in the 1950s in London. He was devoted to the practice of disease in women.
It's like OBGYN.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. That's the OB in OBGYN.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay.
Textbooks refer to how his procedures laid the foundation for modern gynecological surgery. He really advocated for women to be sedated during childbirth. So he would chloroform women while they were giving birth.
Okay. All right.
And then
Great start.
Then do the childbirth.
Now, granted, while I do think that is absolutely wrong, right? I could see the argument for like, oh, this person is in a lot of pain. Let's chloroform them, knock them out. They don't have to experience the pain. They can have birth, right? If they're like in the middle of childbirth, I could see that. I don't think it's right? But I could see how someone who like didn't necessarily have medical insights into that would think that might be a way forward. They probably didn't have anesthetics.
Yeah, but women were giving birth way before this to begin with.
Right, yeah. I'm just thinking like in terms of like, I personally, as a man, I have no obviously experience in pregnancy whatsoever, right? But if I see somebody who is having a painful pregnancy and I think, oh, if I could anesthetize them and they would feel less pain, if they were up for that, I would want that for them. I'm not saying this guy did that, but I'm saying I could see the angle that maybe someone could take, especially in 1850s when they didn't have probably any kind of medical. I don't even know when anesthesia came out, right? Before or after this, I don't know. But I could see why someone who was experienced in pregnancy and had probably exposure to people having potentially traumatic pregnancies, right? Maybe could go to that conclusion. Not saying it's right, and definitely not chloroform, but it's like the same, like you said, like a dentist. Like I could go to a dentist and get anesthetized.
I understand your point.
Uh-huh.
He was later expelled by the Obstetrical Society because they disagreed with his lack of consultation practices.
See, that's messed up, right?
Yeah.
Like you probably should ask before you start chloroforming people.
So he would just chloroform people.
Nice.
And then help with their childbirth.
Oh, God.
So that's why it's different. Like because I can understand it. If people were like, oh yeah, okay. If you're going to give me something that makes it so I don't feel childbirth, then it's fine. But he would chloroform people. Anyway, That's not even what half of this man did. So when he advocated for the use of chloroform to knock out women, he seems a lot more concerned about controlling the situation than helping the women who were in the situation, which is just a clear instance of medical misogyny.
Yeah. Because you're basically like at that point, if they're not opting into it and they're not having a choice to say, yes, I would like to be chloroformed, at that point, you're just the creepy dude with a medical practice.
So he believed in the theory of the psychology of the ovary, which believed that women's medical and emotional problems were based on the internal malfunction of the ovaries.
Oh, so if I was having a bad day because of my menstrual cycle, for example, and my hormones, that's a resulting problem from my ovaries.
Yeah, your ovaries were malfunctioning. If you weren't acting the way that your man told you needed to act, your ovaries are malfunctioning.
Right.
So, in 1866, a book called On the Curability of Certain Forms of Insanity, Epilepsy, Catalepsy, and Hysteria in Females, he proposed all female weakness could be cured by removing the clitoris.
What the heck? Okay.
So, when he saw how his epileptic patients masturbated, they would experience phases like hysteria, epileptic convulsions, and death or idiocy. Like riding the high after an orgasm and stuff. And he said that women would become restless or excited when they would masturbate, or become too tired or useless afterwards.
And it's effectively the same as a man, right? Like, I feel like anybody who has sex, as soon as after sex, you're kind of just wanting to lay down. Like, and have a moment.
The mental health patients were masturbating, so when he would notice them masturbating, he'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. They're getting too excited. And
Well,
then,
what a man of many talents. He's got a bunch of epileptic patients that he's gaining medical insights on how to make broad strokes decisions about how to chloroform people with.
yeah. So what he ended up doing is he would perform these treatments on mentally ill or institutionalized patients without their consents by chloroforming
Oh
them
my god.
and then getting some scissors or a knife. But he preferred scissors.
Nice. That's
Um,
crazy.
the source that I got this from was mostly talking about how this was a way they emphasized Victorian values on gender and sexuality at the time. So they wanted to protect purity and they didn't want women to be sexual creatures. So this was their way of protecting those pure values.
That's wild. That's really, really crazy. I
Yeah.
actually didn't know that like Victorian
Or
society.
Victorian values.
Yeah.
He wanted to protect Victorian values.
Yeah. I didn't know that there was such a like. I didn't know that that was a time that you could do this kind of surgical manipulation. Because I know that like female genital
Mutilation.
mutilation is a thing, but didn't know that that was something that was contributing in Victorian society either.
That's why he was also then expelled later on because he wasn't. People
Yeah,
weren't consenting to that either. He
that's wild.
he was just like, let me see if we
Yeah.
can make their hysteria go away. And he would write in his little thing afterwards saying like, wow, my surgeries were so successful.
Hmm. What a yeah. You got a lot of oh, man. I'm like trying to understand how, because like I obviously like this is 2025, right? We're coming to this with the lens of like, oh, you have a scientific research practice, right? Like you make conclusions based on scientific data. What data did he have that the clitoris was the source of, or your sorry, your ovaries? Your ovaries were your source of your brain malfunction. I just wanted to test it out, so he got a bunch of people from the mental hospital and was like, let's hack them up. Let's just see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so this was in the 1850s. Fast forward to 1998, where we meet Dr. Helen O'Connell. She was a urologist who published the first detailed anatomical study of the clitoris, showing its internal structure. Clitty, what clitty looks like. And she published a follow-up in 2005 that had an MRI that showed the clitoris expand further than the bulbs. So, she is the reason why we have the picture of clitty to begin with. But it took from what? We said 1850s from
Yeah,
Isaac Baker Brown to 1988
yeah,
to figure out what the clitoris is.
yeah. 130 years. Yeah.
Way too long. Studies in 2010 and 2022 show that many educational books still omit the clitoris or underrepresent its anatomy. So it is still something we don't know about.
That's pretty wild. I do think that, like, at least in my high school education, I think the clitoris would be mentioned, but it definitely wouldn't have been in depth, I would say.
So the clitoris is still considered one of the most understudied parts of the human anatomy, especially comparatively to the male sexual anatomy. It's not studied in many peer-reviewed articles, so it's also not like cross-referenced with everyone. And clinical training is still lacking for a lot of gynecologists and medical practitioners, and a lot of them report little to no training on the clitoral anatomy other than the external glands.
That's really interesting.
So if you want to know more, you got to study this yourself.
Yeah.
Got to go and become a doctor and figure out and research it yourself.
There you go.
So yeah, that's why we don't know much about the clitoris, and we still don't know much. Anyway, so that's the clitoris, and clitoris needs some love.
Very much so. Yeah. That's pretty wild. Like I definitely obviously you get a lot of media attention to the penis and male sex, but I don't think that like I would not have guessed that it would have been as far back as the 1500s really that you're getting your initial observation and then kind of like ignoring of the clitoris, right? Like of the anatomy of this organ. It's interesting.
Yeah. Ready to take your pop quiz?
Sure.
All right. So our pop quiz is going to be English. We're going to go through the different euphemisms that we've used to reference female sex organs.
Okay.
Question number 1. Which of the following is an early euphemism for the vulva used in medieval English texts? A. Lady garden. B. Nether lips. C. Quim. Or D. Cupcake.
I think it's quim.
You're correct.
Wow.
Quim was documented as early as 1613, appearing in writing sources referring to female genitalia. It continued in literature through the 17th and 18th centuries.
Huh, interesting.
Question number 2. The word vajayjay was popularized by A. Sex and the City, B. Oprah Winfrey, C. Grey's Anatomy, or D. Beyonce.
I have no idea. I'm gonna guess Grey's Anatomy.
You are correct.
Hey, nice.
So the word vajayjay was coined by the writer Shonda Rhimes in Grey's Anatomy, specifically in season 2, episode 17, just titled As We Know It. So Dr. Bailey, one of the characters, says, "Stop looking at my vajayjay." This term was created as a network-friendly euphemism for vagina because of ABC's standards and practices that had concerns about using the word vagina on television.
Okay. So it's like you can't, it's not direct censorship, but it's in an anatomy doctor setting, right? So you want to be able to use a term. That's okay.
And then Oprah Winfrey is actually the one who picked it up after the show aired and kept using it, and that's how it exploded into the mainstream media.
I didn't know Oprah Winfrey ever said vajayjay.
Yeah. You're 2 for 3, so let's see if you get this last one. Which emoji is often used in reference to the vulva in digital conversations? The peach emoji, the cat emoji, the cookie emoji, or all of the above?
I am the wrong person to answer this because I've never received any of those emojis in the context of this. I'm going to guess D, just based on, I guess it's possible that someone uses any of them. The peach just looks like a butt to me, though, in generic. It's not really. And I guess, I'm going to go with that. D.
You're right. It is actually D. While the peach is normally used as, it's like wildly synonymous with butt, some people use it to describe the vulva as well.
What is the cookie?
The cookie, you've never, someone's like, oh, I ate the cookie.
I've never heard that.
Oh, it's kind of like, it's just a term for vulva. Thanks for listening. Did you learn anything new?
I did. I did not know any of the history stuff related to the clitoris and when it was kind of first quote unquote discovered. I think that's fascinating. Kind of wild that it's been as long as it has been in medical, like, I guess, sphere, but not a whole lot of research has been done on it. That is very interesting. Very neat.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Doing all of this research, I didn't realize it wasn't until 1998 that the clitoris was fully mapped out, and it's just unfortunate that medically women's bodies haven't been studied as vigorously as men. I really had a lot of fun studying this, so I'm glad I could share with all of you. That's the Bell Class. Curious about anything human sexuality related? Drop your questions in our anonymous form linked in the show bio, and we might answer them in a future episode. Your homework? Share what you learned with a friend, because the only way to destigmatize sex is to talk about it. And if you're ready for Extra Credit, sign up for our newsletter to receive our free Essential Sex Conversations workbook and honor roll exclusives. Thanks for being here for a broad sex education. Whether you're unlearning shame or curious as hell, I'm glad you showed up. Bye!